Hi everybody, I'm Delicia and thanks for stopping by the CIGARVIXEN channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing this Davidoff Aniversario Special R series, which is, my impression, it's basically an expansion on a couple different lines that they've kind of collaborated and merged into one. So merging the Aniversario series and the Special series. This one again is the Special R, so it's a Robusto 5x50 on the size. And it's featuring a beautiful silky Ecuadorian Connecticut wrapper, and that's laying on top of a Dominican grown Piloto Seco binder, and the fillers are also Dominican grown. We have the San Vicente Visus and Piloto Ligero and Olor Seco. So just a quick little breakdown if you're not familiar with that terminology, as far as I do try and talk about the blends on any cigar that I do a review on, but Davidoff does a great job in actually breaking down the components as to which part of the tobacco plant they're using. So again, referring to the seco, the visus in this example, and the ligero. If you're not familiar with those terms, if you were to take a look at a tobacco plant itself, I have gone over this in past videos, so if you've already seen this, my apologies, but I thought I'd just throw it in here real quick. And starting with the bottom level on this particular plant is where you have your seco leaves. Go a little bit further up towards the middle and you have your viso. And again, at the very top, you have your ligero leaves, which are a little bit thicker and provide a lot more strength and a lot more flavor. But a beautiful plant, as you can see, nice and green. Just a great example of quality tobacco. Again, if you were to look at a tobacco plant, you kind of can break down the sections. The very top, you have actually what's called medio tiempo, which is not really used. Pretty much can't think of any cigars in the US market that are using the medio tiempo. I do know some Cuban cigars that do incorporate that into their blend, but most of the time they're using the secondary, which is still at the top, which is a ligero. And then most cases you have the ligero, seco, and then the volado, which is at the bottom. In this particular, they're actually using right in between the ligero and the seco, you have the viso. And so again, those different components are responsible for different things in the cigar. So the ligero is usually attributed to the strength level. So if you have some that are using a lot of ligero, you know off the bat that the cigar is probably going to be on the stronger side as far as like the nicotine content and the flavors of the ligero being the part of the plant that stays actually on the actual plant the longest amount of time. And then the viso, seco, volado, all of those components again are used for aroma, elasticity, combustion. So again, that's where the blending really does come into play. And it's nice that they disclose that information. Not everybody does that. So they're really thorough about letting you know not just the seed variety, but what actual part of the plant it's coming from. And again, on the tobacco plant, when they're doing when it's harvest time and they're doing the primings, they actually start from the bottom up, in case you weren't familiar with that as well. So again, the ligero being one of the last parts of the plant to be primed, and so it's getting the most nutrients from the plant, spending the most time, and that's why it's a little bit stronger, a little bit thicker, the leaf texture itself. So again, just a quick little recap if you weren't familiar with some of those terms. I like to try and throw those in there once in a while. But back to the cigar itself, I mentioned it has a beautiful, almost flawless looking wrapper to it. Davidoff does use a very high quality tobacco in all of their products, which again kind of correlates to that higher price point that you'll find pretty much in any humidor. When you're looking at any of the Davidoff cigars, they do carry a higher price point. I have been privy enough to visit their farms a couple times, actually. Very impressive, not just their farms, but also their factory. One of the things that caught my eye way back when, in my first visit to one of their farms, was the fact that they do everything themselves. So they cross-pollinate, they actually create the different seeds. I mean, they're just very involved in the process versus some other manufacturers that maybe are just out there purchasing tobacco. And not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just a little bit more involved. You know that they're handling the process 100%. So that is one thing I will say that kind of correlates again with that higher price point, because if anybody is familiar with the Davidoff brand, it is a pricier stick. So I'm gonna go ahead and get right into this. Took a little bit of time rambling on there. Gonna give it a quick little cut. unraveling there. Okay. So not a ton of flavor on the pre-lit draw, just picking up a little bit of kind of a cedar. A little funny on the lighting here. Let's try and fix that. Okay, so a little bit of cedar, hint of spice on the finish, kind of like a white pepper, very light. The initial startup here is a little funky. It's like not wanting to catch in certain... I don't want to keep messing with it, but yeah, the burn itself is a little off. Not a ton of flavor. Again, I'm pausing. I'm trying to search for some of the flavors in here. The aroma is a tad bit bitter, not that normal kind of a welcoming aroma that I usually look for. This one is a little bit on the bitter side of things. Again, the flavors are kind of straightforward. You just pick up a light cedar, a little bit of white pepper. The smoke itself is kind of on the creamy side, but not, just not a ton of flavor so far. Just kind of, it's okay. It's not doing anything spectacular just yet. So I'm gonna go ahead and smoke it down a little bit more, and hopefully it gets some more excitement going on with the flavors so we can talk about that. So coming back in right around the halfway point, getting into the second third basically, on the Davidoff Aniversario Special R. The ash itself has been a little disappointing. It kind of has been real flaky, so it's been coming off and not real solid on the ash, which I guess I picked the wrong outfit to smoke in. But, you know, again, looking at the price point, number one, but also just the brand itself, I tend to be a little bit more like particular on stuff like that, because this, if I didn't mention it in the beginning, this is about minimum of $20 for this cigar, probably a little bit more depending on, you know, where you're buying it from, of course, but right around, let's just call it $20. So it's not cheap for this cigar. So for that price point, it kind of puts it into a category of being a little bit more particular with, hey, the ash needs to be solid. I mean, that would help. And the flavors need to be really on point, and the construction, all of those things. So the burn line itself started out a little funky. It's somewhat self-corrected. I did touch it up to try to even it out a little bit more. And for the most part, it evened out. It's a little bit wobbly, but the ash itself is just real flaky, and it was kind of coning out a little bit. So not changing too much of the overall experience, other than more of an annoyance type of a thing. But flavor wise, getting a lot of pepper through the retro. So almost too much, almost too kind of like a borderline bitter on that taste. A little bit earthy, picking up a slight honey element to it as well. But all the flavors are very subtle, so it's nothing other than the pepper. The pepper does come right back out at you, especially if you do the retro. You really pick that up. Again, almost a little bit too much as far as throwing off the balance of, you know, with those other subtle flavors that are there. It's kind of overpowering those. So I'm not a huge fan of that so far, but you know, just going to continue to smoke it down. And it is getting a little bit warm, so I'm trying to smoke a little bit slower than I normally do. I tend to be a little bit faster with smoking, but I'm trying to slow down because I was noticing that it was starting to get a little bit warm. But yeah, I'm not crazy about the flavors, or lack of, I guess I could say. It's just not any, there's no wow factor in it. And again, for that price point, I just kind of tend to look for a little bit of a wow. You know, it's not an inexpensive cigar by any means, but again, gonna keep giving it a fair assessment here, smoke it down a little bit more, and I will check back in for the final little third. So coming back for the final third on the Davidoff Aniversario special series, I have to admit, it's not too special in my book. I mean, I hate to say that, but I'm just really underwhelmed. Again, for the price point, I think that's where there's a hang up. It's a combination of, you know, again, the burn line was nothing impressive at all. The ash was very sloppy. It was falling all over the place and kind of getting everywhere. So that off the bat already was kind of just more of a nuisance than anything else. But the flavors were just nothing special. It was maybe a medium body, pepper, cedar, earthy, little bit of a honey. That's about it. And again, that pepper seemed to kind of throw off the balance of the other flavors, because the other flavors were so subtle that you really just are tasting like a white pepper the whole time. And it was borderline bitter. So it just, again, when you're out there and you're in a humidor and you're seeing the price point for some of these cigars, they really do need to stand out. There's so many good cigars out there right now, and some that are right on that same price point that are well worth it, and others that are even under that price point that are much better. So again, most of the time I encourage you guys to, like, hey, go out and try it for yourself. Taste is subjective, all that. But in this case, it's like, for that price point, I don't know if I would even recommend that you try it. I mean, of course, if you already have, I would love to hear your feedback, because I'm curious if any of you have had the same type of experience or the same opinion, the same thoughts. Maybe you guys think I'm crazy. I don't know. I'm just giving my fair opinion of being just underwhelmed, and just kind of like almost to where I'm pretty much done at this point. Like, I'm not even gonna try and smoke it down to the nub. And again, it's just kind of a waste with that price point on there. So I would expect a little bit better, to be honest. So that's my assessment, that's my review, and I always thank you all for tuning in and hanging out. And I do, again, welcome your comments. I'd love to see your thoughts. Make sure you tag me on your Instagram. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. Cheers.